I always thought dying on a rooftop was stupid, but tonight I had way too many competitors for Idiot of the Year. Wind slapped the rain straight into my face, like the city itself was trying to wash me off its skin. Neon bled across wet concrete in smeared streaks, pink, cyan, corporate white, reflections broken by my boots as I ran. Sirens wailed somewhere below, echoing up the sides of glass towers like angry ghosts with good sound systems. Above me, surveillance drones hummed in coordinated circles, their navigation lights, blinking politely while they hunted me like I was a glitch they needed to patch, which, to be fair, I was. My bracelet vibrated against my wrist in frantic pulses. Red, red, red. The tiny screen flashed. Violation detected. Omega status, non-compliant. Reporting. Yeah, I get it, I muttered, lungs burning. I'm a bad citizen. Call my lawyer. Oh wait, the bracelet didn't care. It never did. I knew because I helped design the damn system, or at least its bones, back when I still played nice with the world. Funny thing about building a cage, sooner or later, you end up rattling the bars from the inside. My jacket was soaked through, hanging heavy on my shoulders. The guitar case on my back slammed against my spine with every stride, the weight of it comforting and brutal all at once. Anyone who saw me would think, idiot street musician, running from police over some petty thing. That's what I wanted them to think. No one needed to know the guitar case was mostly hollowed out and wired to the teeth. I sprinted toward the edge of the rooftop, concrete slick under my boots. A rusted maintenance bridge connected this building to the next, a narrow, corroded strip of metal that looked like a strong sneeze could send it crashing down onto the traffic below. Perfect. Don't look down, I told myself, then glanced down anyway. Far below, the post-pandemic city glowed sterile and alive. Autonomous cars slid through streets in clean lines. Holographic ads floated above intersections, selling parties, pills, freedom as a subscription. The white zone, the compliant part of the city, glittered like a well-disinfected wound. I was running toward the opposite of that. Toward the rumor, the myth, the clean zone. Or at least, the hatch that would get me one step closer to it. I hit the bridge at full speed. Metal groaned under my weight, flexing in a way that did not inspire long-term confidence. For a second, my foot slipped on algae-slick steel, and my stomach nosedived with it. My body lurched sideways, gravity yawning under me like a hungry mouth. Falling isn't deadly, I gasped, flailing my arms, trying to grab some balance. Landing is... Somehow, the bridge didn't snap. I staggered across, boots slamming, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might punch out of my chest and go find a safer owner. Behind me, a drone lock-on chime pinged, sharp and cold. Oh, good. They had visual. I leapt off the bridge onto the next rooftop, knees nearly buckling on impact. Pain shot up my legs. The guitar case thudded into my back, straps cutting into my shoulders. I sucked in a ragged breath, looking ahead. There, near the far corner of the roof, a service hatch, half covered in grime and old warning stickers. If I could get into the building, I could slip down through the maintenance levels, out of the white zone scanners and toward the edge where their coverage thinned. Toward the clean zone, the only part of this city that supposedly wasn't choked by surveillance and control. My bracelet flickered angrily. Report sent. Response unit dispatched. Of course they are, I wheezed. Wouldn't want to keep the entertainment waiting. I took off toward the hatch, dodging around a cluster of old ventilation blocks. Rust had eaten away their sides, leaving jagged teeth of metal and flaking paint. Antennas and dishes jutted at odd angles into the sky like a nest of broken fingers, catching raindrops and stray signals. The drone's buzzing grew louder, closer. One of them swooped lower, scanning beams slicing through the rain. A white cone of light swept over my shoulder. Heat prickled the back of my neck as the sensor briefly grazed my signature. Target acquired. A flat synthetic voice echoed from above. Go acquire a soul, I snapped back, more out of habit than hope. I slid the last few meters and dropped to my knees at the hatch. My fingers were numb from the cold, but muscle memory carried me. I dug into my pocket, finding the multi-tool I'd customized. One twist, one press, a tiny magnetic pulse. The lock's indicator light glitched, flickered from green to red, then died. "Come on, sweetheart," I murmured. "Don't make this awkward." The latch gave with a reluctant clunk. Victory swelled in my chest, sharp, bright, dangerous. I grabbed the handle, ready to haul it open and disappear from the sky's line of sight, when the hair on the back of my neck rose. It wasn't the drones. Those felt like static. This was heavier. He was behind me before I heard him. Of course he was. Max. Just my name. No sirens, no shouting, no barked orders. Just that one syllable, calm and unhurried, sliding into my spine like a cold needle. My hand froze on the hatch. I turned my head slowly. He stood on the stairs leading up from the lower level, a silhouette cut out of black steel against the smeared neon haze. Tall, broad shoulders, dry, somehow, despite the rain. His uniform, the matte black of the Special Regulation Unit, looked like it had been ironed by a perfectionist AI. No wrinkles, no stains, no life. Vince Karen. I'd seen him a dozen times from afar, on big screens, in news clips, in internal training videos back when I still wore an ID badge and pretended I was part of something noble. Out here, in the flesh, he looked exactly the same. That annoyed me. He met my gaze, and his eyes were the color of clean asphalt after rain, dark, reflective, giving nothing away. I snorted, because if I didn't make a joke, I was going to throw up. "Well," I said. "If it isn't the city's favorite machine for breaking people." His expression didn't flicker. "Max," he said again, like he was confirming data. "It's over." Behind him, 2 drones hovered, politely silent, waiting for their human handler to finish the formality of arrest before they tagged, bagged, and categorized me. My bracelet went wild on my wrist, buzzing like a trapped insect. Red indicators flared up along its band, sending my location, vitals, ID, everything, to the central system. Vince's gaze dropped to it, then lifted back to my face. Step away from the hatch. Part of me wanted to bolt. Another part knew that if I tried, I'd end up face down on the concrete with a sedation dart in my neck. Vince's unit didn't miss. And then there was the smallest, most reckless part of me that whispered, "You planned for this. Remember?" I exhaled, forced my hand to let go of the hatch handle, and stood up slowly. "That's dramatic, even for you," I said. "You climbed all the way up here just to say it's over?" "You could have texted." For a split second, something, confusion, flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could tell the difference between the city's chemically clean scent and the low, steady warmth that was just him. Close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw, a pale line that disappeared beneath his collar. Up close, he didn't look like a machine. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to be anything but a weapon. He reached for my wrist. "Don't," I started, instinct snapping my voice sharp. Too late. His fingers closed around the bracelet. Strong, unhurried. For a moment, heat from his skin seeped into my chilled hand, confusing my nerves. Then he gave a short, precise twist. Pain flashed up my arm, a nerve-deep sting, as the inner nodes of the bracelet bit into my skin in protest. The device sparked, tiny, angry lightning against my wrist. I smelled burnt plastic and ozone. Then the bracelet went dark. No light, no buzzing, no tether. I stared at it, stunned, feeling phantom vibrations that never came. "What the hell did you just do?" My voice cracked in the middle, which was deeply unfair. Vince let go of my hand. The bracelet stayed there, dead weight, nothing more than a ring of scorched metal around my wrist. "Disabled it," he said simply. "That's illegal." I laughed, sharp, a little hysterical. "You can't. You're Special Regulation. You're literally the poster boy of protocol. You don't get to just turn off state property because you feel like it." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't do anything because I feel like it," he said. "Ever." Great. The one joke I made that should have bounced off his armor, and it lands. Rain pattered steadily around us, pinging off metal, soaking into my hair. Somewhere nearby, a billboard flickered through 3 different ads, glitching between a sparkling beverage, a vacation in the Clouds district, and a new pill to regulate emotional spikes. My own emotional spike was doing just fine without pharmaceutical help. I took a step back from him, cradling my wrist. "So what now?" I asked. "You drag me down to a holding cell, let them slap a fresh bracelet on, then ship me to a reconditioning camp. Because if that's the case, I'd like to register a complaint about your timing." I was one hatch away from disappearing. Vince watched me with that flat, unreadable gaze. The drones whirred quietly overhead, their lights still set to standby. He could have said yes, could have recited the protocol line by line. Instead, he said something I didn't see coming. "You have a choice." I laughed again, though there wasn't much humor left in me. "Pretty sure that ship sailed when I was born, marked Omega, and you people decided I needed a glorified ankle monitor." His eyes narrowed just slightly at you people. Not much, but I caught it. "Two options," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "One, you go to a regulation facility, officially processed, assigned, monitored. Camp," I translated. He didn't deny it. "Two," Vince said, and there was the faintest pause, like the word was heavier than the rest. "You come with me." The drones hummed, adjusting their altitude like they were leaning in to listen. "Come with you, where?" I asked slowly. "On a nice little walk, coffee, a state-sanctioned murder date?" He didn't answer that. Behind his eyes, something moved. Not emotion exactly, but the shadow of it. Calculation, maybe. Or conflict. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. The problem was, fear had never had great reflexes in my system. It showed up late to the party, when everything was already on fire. Right now, what I felt most was a sharp, electric flicker of opportunity. Because getting locked in a camp would end everything. My freedom, my plan, my father's name. But going with Vince Karen, the city's favorite weapon? That was proximity. And proximity was access. I held his gaze, letting the rain run down my face like I wasn't shaking inside. "Those are terrible choices," I said. "But I've always had a soft spot for bad ideas." My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. I shrugged, made my voice as bored and careless as I could. "Fine," I said. "Let's go. I love field trips." For the first time, something like, not a smile, but a fracture in his neutrality, touched his mouth. Gone in an instant, he turned, gesturing toward the stairwell. "Stay close," he said. "Don't run." "Wouldn't dream of it," I lied. I took one last look at the hatch that might have led me to the clean zone. To a different plan, a simpler kind of running. Then I followed the man I'd sworn to destroy. Rain swallowed our footsteps as we disappeared into the stairwell's shadow. The drones rose above the rooftop and drifted away, their work apparently done. I'd thought I was leading him toward a trap of my own making. But as the door shut behind us with a soft final click, a cold thought slid under my skin. Maybe the only door that had really closed tonight was the one behind me. If hell had a lobby, it would look exactly like the special regulation block. The elevator doors slid open with a soft hiss, and I stepped into a corridor so white and polished it made hospital halls look grungy. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and something colder, recycled, filtered, stripped of any personality. Matte ceiling panels glowed with even light. No shadows, no warmth. I tugged absently at the dead bracelet on my wrist. It didn't even pinch anymore. Just a piece of burnt metal, hanging there like a joke only I got. Vince stepped out first, his boots silent on the floor, then half-turned, checking that I followed. He didn't touch me, didn't shove me, didn't even grab my elbow. Just watched with those flat asphalt eyes until I moved. Two guards at the far end of the corridor glanced up as we passed. Their gazes swept over me, taking in damp clothes, guitar case, messy hair. One of them smirked like he already had me filed under. Omega, trouble, probably temporary. Then their eyes hit Vince, saw the insignia on his shoulder, and both of them straightened like someone had yanked invisible strings. The smirk vanished. Their gazes slid away. Apparently walking next to the city's favorite weapon came with perks. We stopped in front of a door labeled simply 7 degrees Fahrenheit. No nameplate, no title, just that. Vince held his wrist to a panel. There was a soft chime, and the door unlocked with a muted click. "Inside," he said. His tone didn't change, but something in the air did. Denser. Like the corridor itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if I'd be stupid enough to make a scene. "So, this is where you keep your guests?" I asked lightly. "No welcome mat? No fruit basket?" "I'm offended. If you prefer a facility bunk," he replied. "That can be arranged." I shut up and walked inside. The first thing that hit me was the order. The room was small, but not cell small. More like a minimalist studio apartment for someone who'd broken up with the concept of clutter a long time ago. White walls, gray floor, a bed tucked into the corner with military tight, sheets, a narrow wardrobe, and a desk under a wall screen currently dark. Matte light from a panel above filled the space with the kind of neutral glow interior ads always promised but never delivered. No shadows, no dust, no personality. I glanced at the desk. There were exactly 4 items on it. A closed tablet, a stack of 3 identical black notebooks, a pen aligned with almost absurd precision along the edge, and a glass of water filled to the same level you'd see in a stock photo. I'd bet good money he knew exactly how many milliliters were in it. The wardrobe door stood slightly ajar. Inside, I could see a row of neatly hung clothes. Black, 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 and... wow. One dark gray shirt. Rebel. If he gets into heaven, I thought, God's first request will be, "Can you please organize the place?" Out loud, I said, "Let me guess. You sleep standing up in that corner to save on sheet maintenance?" Vince stepped in after me, let the door close behind us with a soft seal that sounded way too much like a lock. He didn't take off his jacket. He didn't look around. This was his space. But he moved like it barely existed. "You're temporarily assigned here," he said. "Until your status is clarified." Clarified, I echoed. Nice word. Very comforting. Almost doesn't sound like decided whether you're salvageable or need to disappear. He ignored that. "Bathroom is through there." He gestured to a smaller door off to the right. "You can shower. There are spare clothes in the wardrobe. Don't leave this room without permission. Don't try to access the building network. Don't attempt to tamper with any security fixtures. Don't be myself," I summarized. "Got it." His eyes flicked to mine. He didn't hold the gaze for long. Barely a second, maybe less, before looking away. Again, as if he was scanning for threats in the corners of his own apartment. "You're not a prisoner," he said. "That why you disabled my bracelet instead of slapping a fresh one on?" His jaw moved, but he didn't answer. He seemed to search for a word, which was weird enough to make my brain pause. Finally, "in my custody." Oh, that's much better. "So I'm not a prisoner, I'm, what, checked luggage?" His face didn't change, but the air around him did, tightening like a wire pulled one notch too far. "Max," he said, "don't try to run. So I am a prisoner." Silence. He stepped back toward the door, thumb hovering over the control panel. "Use the shower," he said. "Rest. I'll be back later. What if I get bored?" He didn't dignify that with a response. The door slid open. He stepped out, and it closed behind him, the electronic lock clicking back into place. I waited exactly 5 seconds. Then I started testing things. First, the obvious. The door panel. No external handle. No manual override. Touching where Vince had tapped his wrist got me nothing. I tried the wall beside it, feeling for seams, hidden panels, anything. The building hummed quietly around me. Air through vents, distant footfalls. A low, constant buzz like the whole place was wired into one nervous system. I slid the guitar case off my back and set it on the bed. My shoulder sighed in relief. The case looked almost innocent here, against the crisp white sheets. I knew better. Half the hardware in there was technically illegal. The other half was morally questionable. "Okay," I muttered to myself. New home. New sandbox. I stalked across the room on purposefully loud steps, heels hitting the floor with just enough force to echo. If he was watching through some hidden camera feed, I wanted him to hear every stomp. "You're temporarily assigned here," I mimicked under my breath, lowering my voice in an approximation of his. "Don't run. Don't breathe. don't have independent thoughts. My eyes tracked upward. There was a vent in the corner near the ceiling, just big enough to fit a person. If you were on the smaller side and had a flexible sense of self-preservation, I felt a grin tug at my mouth. Hello, old friend. Vents and I had history. Bad, duct-taped, bruised history. I still had a scar on my elbow from the last time I trusted rusty airflow. Infrastructure, but what was life without repetition of poor decisions? I dragged the desk quietly across the floor until it was under the vent, climbed onto it, then onto the back of the chair, wobbling only a little. From up here, the room looked even more clinically depressing. Seriously, I muttered. If this guy gets into heaven, God's going to ask him to alphabetize the angels. Balancing with one hand on the ceiling, I reached up with the other and tested the vent cover. The screws felt standard, not industrial lockdown, not welded. That was either incompetence or arrogance. Knowing this place, I bet on arrogance. I dug a slim tool from my pocket, one they'd missed in the quick rooftop pat-down, and started working on the first screw. Metal squeaked softly. The second screw came out faster. Sweat prickled at my neck, partly from effort, mostly from adrenaline. Every instinct screamed that I was being stupid, which, historically, hadn't stopped me once. I had just loosened the third screw when the room's door slid open with a gentle sigh. I froze. The vent cover dangled from one screw, tilted like a crooked halo above my head. Vince stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other holding a folded towel and what looked like a plain black t-shirt. Of course he did. We stared at each other for a beat. Slowly he stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. He didn't look up first. He looked at the desk out of place in the middle of the room, at the chair, at the slight scuff marks on the floor. Then his gaze tracked upward. Our eyes met, me clinging to the ceiling corner like a particularly underqualified spider. I cleared my throat. So, I said, "You're back early." His face stayed neutral, but there was a tightness around his eyes that definitely hadn't been there before. Irritation, real, human irritation. Progress. "Get down," he said quietly. "Why? Afraid I'll escape through your very dramatic ventilation system?" I tilted my head. "What are you anyway? Tuned to the sound of displaced air? Or to your level of idiocy?" he replied. And there it was. A sharper edge, just a hint, cutting through the metal calm. I blinked. Well, that was almost an insult. I felt weirdly proud. Carefully, I climbed down, chair, then desk, then floor. I tried to make it look deliberate, like this had all been a sophisticated physics experiment and not a mid-tier jailbreak attempt. Vince watched every movement, eyes tracking with the focus of someone who cataloged threats for fun. "You're not subtle," he said. "I'm charming," I corrected. "It just looks similar from your angle." He set the folded clothes and towel on the bed, straightened them into perfect parallel lines out of habit, then finally turned back toward me. "There are cameras in the ducts," he said. "Motion sensors, heat scanners. You'd trip 3 different alarms in under 10 seconds. "You could have opened with that," I pointed out. "Saved me the effort." "I wanted you to understand," he said, "that this is not a facility you can bypass with a screwdriver and poor judgment." I snorted. "Wow. I'm starting to think you don't appreciate my skill set." He didn't answer, but his mouth flattened slightly. That faint crease between his brows deepened. His shoulders were a fraction tenser than when we'd left the rooftop. He was annoyed. I'd gotten under his skin. Not much, but enough. New note to self, this, right here, this crack in his composure, was a point of entry. A flaw in the armor. A potential breakpoint in the system named Vince Karen. "Fine," I said, lifting my hands in mock surrender. "I'll behave. For now. Shower, clothes, no heroic ventilation adventures. Happy?" He studied me for another long second, longer than usual, unsettlingly close to 2. Then, quietly, "No." That threw me. Before I could poke at it, he stepped back toward the door. "Don't move the furniture again," he said. "It leaves marks." The door slid open. "Can't have that," I said. "Wouldn't want to ruin the showroom." His shoulders stiffened for half a heartbeat. Then he was gone, and the door sealed shut with that same soft, final breath. I looked up at the crooked vent cover, then at the perfectly folded towel on the bed. My lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. So, Vince Karen wasn't a perfect machine after all. Good. Machines were hard to break. People, on the other hand, people cracked. By the time Vince came back the next morning, I had discovered exactly 3 things about room 7F. 1. The shower had better water pressure than anything I'd had in the last 5 years. 2. All the spare clothes fit me suspiciously well. 3. Staring at white walls made you start counting your own thoughts like they were cracks in the paint. He stepped in without preamble, uniform crisp, hair still damp from his own shower because of course even his hygiene ran on schedule. "Get ready," he said. "We're going out." My brain did a short, hopeful glitch. "Out, as in touch grass out," I asked. Or, taken out back and quietly erased from the system out. He didn't bite. "Status review," he said. "External department. You'll come with me." I tried not to look too pleased about the fact that leaving this sterile box even under armed escort sounded like a vacation. "Wow," I said. "First you invite me to sleep over, now you're taking me out. If you keep this up, people will think we're dating." He ignored that too, but the muscle in his jaw ticked. Tiny, but there. Progress. They didn't bother with a marked transport. Of course they didn't. Vince was the sort of man who didn't need sirens or flashing lights to move through the city like he owned it. We took an unmarked black car from the underground garage. I slid into the passenger seat, guitar case wedged between my knees, and fought the urge to press my face to the window like a kid heading to the zoo. We emerged into the white zone first. Out here, the city didn't just look disinfected, it felt disinfected. Smooth glass and steel towers stretch upward, every line clean, every edge precise. Sidewalks were spotless. Drones glided in perfect arcs overhead in pre-programmed traffic lanes. Holographic ads hovered at regulation height, colors carefully balanced not to overstimulate the populace. Even the air smelled like nothing. A perfectly calibrated absence of scent. No smoke, no oil, no sweat. Just the faint whisper of filtration systems working overtime. Vince drove like he did everything else, steady, exact, no wasted movements. His eyes flicked between the road and the projected HUD, never lingering on anything that wasn't necessary. "You always start your mornings with light kidnapping and joy rides through the most boring part of town?" I asked, watching a group of white-collar betas in identical coats cross at a regulated crossing. They didn't talk, just checked their bracelets against a scanner and moved on. "This is where you lived," he said. Not a question. "Worked," I corrected. "There's a difference. White zone is where you pretend to be alive while slowly deleting yourself, one spreadsheet at a time." He glanced sideways at me. The look said, "You're exaggerating." "In the white zone," I said, leaning my head back against the seat, people are afraid to breathe wrong in case it throws off the air quality index. He didn't comment, but I caught the faintest hint of a frown, like the idea of being afraid of air personally offended him. We passed through the first checkpoint in silence. The tunnel that separated central regulation territory from the outer sectors was lined with scanners and embedded sensors. The car's system pinged a greeting. Panels along the wall lit up as they read us. Vehicle recognized. A pleasant synthetic voice chimed. Unit leader, Karen, Vince. Clearance, alpha grade. Passenger, unknown, temporary attachment. I stiffened. Unknown. Vince's disabled my bracelet, burned my ID out of the system. I was a ghost, sitting in Regulation's lap. He spoke clearly, evenly. Attachment registered under my authority. Manual override. There was a pause. Then, override accepted. Responsibility logged. I arched a brow. Responsibility, huh? That's a heavy word. You sure you want it on your permanent record? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The tunnel released us into another corridor of the city's guts. Here, the walls weren't white. They were a calm gray, broken by embedded light strips and occasional panels, spritzing controlled amounts of synthetic aroma into the air. Citrus, pine, something clinical and soothing. Transition corridors. The kind you built to make people feel like the world outside was just another controlled room. Middle zone, I muttered. Where they teach you that even getting from point A to point B should smell like corporate focus group. We drove past more checkpoints, more scanners, more of that soft, friendly voice confirming what we already knew. Vince belonged. I didn't. And then, slowly, the city stopped smelling like nothing. The first hint of the clean zone hit my nose before we saw it. Smoke and spices and the unmistakable tang of too many people crammed into spaces, never meant for that many lives. Buildings shifted from mirrored glass to concrete patched with steel and old brick. Holograms gave way to painted signs, then to wild, sprawling graffiti that crawled up walls and over rooftops. Drones still moved overhead, but they flew higher, less sure, like even their programming couldn't get a full grip on this place. This is off-regulation territory, Vince said, more to himself than to me. Yeah, I said quietly. That's kind of the point. We left the car at the edge of a wide square jammed with stalls. Improvised markets, cables strung, overhead in chaotic spiderwebs, fabrics hanging like flags of a dozen different lives. Smoke curled from food carts, heavy with the smell of frying oil, grilled meat, and something sweet and sticky. A kid wove through the crowd, shout singing about fresh noodles. Someone argued loudly about the price of synthetic coffee. Music leaked from 3 different speakers, none of it agreeing on a genre. In the white zone, people were afraid to breathe. Here, people were afraid to shut up. I stepped out of the car and sucked in a lungful of air. It scratched going down, full of dust and life, but it was real. Careful, I told Vince. If you stay here too long, you might accidentally grow a personality. He didn't rise to the bait. His gaze swept the square in quick, assessing arcs. A few people fell silent when they saw him. Uniforms have that effect. But then someone in the crowd called out, "Hey, Captain Steele." I blinked. A teenage beta on a beat-up bike grinned at him, one hand lifted in a lazy salute. A couple more voices echoed it, amused. Captain Steele, keeping us safe, huh? Vince inclined his head slightly. Not a smile, not warmth, but not rejection either. Just acknowledgement. You have fans, I said, stunned. Do they know you recharge in a docking station at night? He gave me a sidelong look. I've never met them. Of course you haven't. God forbid you interact with your own fan club. They might get ideas. We cut through the market. People stared, then went back to their business. Kids darted between legs, shrieking with laughter. Somewhere close, someone was playing a battered electric guitar with exactly 4 working strings, ringing raw, imperfect chords out of it. My fingers itched. Vince stopped abruptly. A small boy lay sprawled on the ground, his cheap plastic bike tipped over beside him. One of the wheels spun uselessly, clicking. The boy's eyes were wide, cheeks flushed with embarrassment and the brink of tears. Before I could say anything, Vince moved. He crouched beside the kid, one knee touching dirty concrete, and set the bike upright with careful movements. No injuries, he said, voice flat but softer maybe. You can stand. The boy sniffed, nodded, and scrambled to his feet. Vince held the handlebars steady until the kid had both hands on them again. Check your path next time, Vince said. The ground isn't going anywhere. The kid stared at him like he'd just been blessed by some very serious, very tall god. Thanks, Captain Steele, he mumbled, then pedaled away as fast as he could. I watched all of it. Something knotting in my chest. That was almost nice, I said as we walked on. You sure your programming allows for that? I don't have programming, he replied. Could have fooled me. Our destination was a squat concrete building near the edge of the square. Outside, it looked like any other old structure. Inside, it was wired, network central for this sector. That was the excuse, at least. Officially, we were here for a status consultation about my case. Unofficially, I was here to steal everything I could. As soon as we stepped in, my focus shifted. Walls lined with old terminals, servers humming like bees in the background. My brain flipped a switch, from spectator to hacker. While Vince spoke to the local officer at the front desk, I let my eyes wander, mapping exits, counting cameras, tracking cable runs. My fingers twitched against my thigh, itching for a terminal, a port, any access point I could worm my way into. The plan was simple: get close enough to hook into their network skim, for internal routing codes and backtrace pathways to central archives. The data I needed, the truth about my father, was buried high in regulation towers. This was just one stepping stone. Max. Vince's voice cut through my calculations. I looked up. He was watching me, with that sharp, evaluating look. "You're scanning the room," he said. "You're not?" "I am," he said. "For threats." "So am I said lightly. "Just a different category." Something in his mouth tightened, but he let it go. We finished the bureaucratic theater faster than I expected. Apparently, when Vince vouched for something, the system signed off even if it didn't understand why. I tried not to think too hard about the line in my file that now read, "Attached to Unit Leader Karen, manual override, responsibility assumed." On the way out, we walked side by side through the square again. The noise, the colors, the smells swelled around us, pressing close. After a stretch of silence, I glanced over at him. "Do you ever smile?" I asked. "Like, on purpose?" "Not that I think you do it by accident either. Smiling is unnecessary," he said, without missing a beat. "That's not what I asked." We walked a few more steps. Somewhere to our right, a vendor shouted over sizzling oil, a kid laughed, someone cursed cheerfully at a broken cart. Then, barely, like his face had to fight muscle memory to do it, the corner of his mouth shifted. Not much, just a ghost of something. Not regulation approved. I stared. "Wow," I breathed. "Look at that." Captain Steele has a debug mode. The almost smile vanished. But I'd seen it. Walls didn't fall in a day. Sometimes, they started with one hairline crack. By the third day of not being arrested, re-braceleted, or shipped off to a camp, I started to suspect something was wrong with the universe. Or with Vince. Room 7F had become, not comfortable exactly, but familiar. I knew how the light dimmed at exactly 2,300 hours. I knew the hum pattern of the ventilation. I knew the way Vince's footsteps sounded in the corridor when he approached. Steady even, like a metronome that had never missed a beat in its life. We spent most of our waking hours in some variant of the same routine. He worked. I accompanied him under the guise of attached asset. Meetings, checkpoints, bathed in neon streets. He watched for threats. I watched for cracks. That morning, the crack finally showed. We were back at Regulation HQ, in one of the internal briefing rooms, another white box, with a table, a wall screen, and chairs that looked ergonomic and felt like punishment. Vince was reviewing a report on his tablet, standing instead of sitting because of course he was. I sat on the table, swinging one leg, half reading the projection over his shoulder. It was about me, Omega, unbraceleted, status, pending, unit override Karen, 5th. Lots of language about risk assessment and temporary exception allowances. "See," I said, tapping the air where a line about his assumed liability hovered. "This is why I never put anyone down as my emergency contact. Paperwork like that? That's a curse." He didn't look up. "You shouldn't read internal documents. You shouldn't leave them where I can see them." "I didn't," he said. "You're reflected in the glass." I blinked, then glanced at the wall screen's dark border. Sure enough, my faint outline stared back. "Do you ever get tired of being terrifyingly competent?" I asked. "Or is that like part of your recharge cycle?" Silence. He kept scrolling. I hopped off the table and moved around to face him fully. "Hey," I said. He didn't look up. "Vince." His eyes lifted, finally, meeting mine. 1 second. Less, about as intimate as a security scan. I held his gaze anyway. "You do realize you're not a machine, right?" I asked. The question hung there, heavier than it had any right to be. He froze, not visibly maybe to anyone else, but I'd spent enough time watching him move to recognize the moment when the internal gears stuttered. His fingers stopped on the tablet screen. His shoulders locked. His eyes went unfocused, just for a heartbeat, like some invisible process had seized his central processor. I shouldn't have felt triumphant. I did anyway. What you do, I went on. Softer. How you move, how you talk. Fine. You trained that. They trained that into you. But somewhere along the line, you decided that's all you are. A regulation algorithm with a pulse. His jaw clenched. There's no point in speculating about things that don't change the outcome, he said. The words came out too precise, too flat, as if he was reading protocol off an internal script. Wow, I said. Listen to that. It even sounds like system error. A flicker of something, warning maybe, flashed behind his eyes. Don't do that, he said. Do what? Point out that you're not actually a walking rulebook? Analyze me, he replied. Project your opinions. Sorry, I said, not sorry at all. It's a profession hazard. You spend enough time writing behavioral models for a surveillance network, you start seeing patterns. I took a step closer, feeling reckless, like I was poking at a live wire just to see how bright it would spark. You know what I think? I asked. No. I think they wanted a perfect soldier, I said. And instead, they got a factory defect with a conscience. The air changed. It happened fast, like a circuit being rerouted. 1 second, he was marble cold, tension held tight. The next, heat snapped through the room like an exposed cable. His eyes sharpened. His shoulders pulled back. His hand tightened around the tablet so hard I heard the casing creak. Careful, he said quietly. There was no volume to it, no raised voice, just a new note, thin, raw, almost violent. If emotion had a color, it would have flashed red in that moment. I'd wanted a crack. I'd found one. And for one stupid, animal heartbeat, I was actually afraid. I swallowed. Then, because my self-preservation instincts were deeply flawed, I grinned. There it is, I said. Knew there was something under all that steel plating. His stare could have cut through concrete. We stood like that for a few seconds. Then, abruptly, he turned away. The tension snapped back into something rigid and contained. Briefing is in 20 minutes, he said. You should eat. Wow, I muttered. From homicidal glare to nutritional advice in under 5 seconds. That's range. He ignored that, of course, and headed for the door. On impulse, I jogged to catch up. Cafeteria? I asked. Yes. Good, I said, grabbing his sleeve for half a second to steer him down a different corridor. Because if I'm going to get yelled at, I'd like to do it with caffeine. You're already over your caffeine allowance, he said, not pulling away, just matching my stride. Then you'll just have to arrest me again, I said. Come on. This way. The HQ cafeteria was as soulless as every other regulation space. Rows of tables, a food dispenser wall, the same neutral light. People in uniform, in suits, with bracelets in every color, sat in neat clusters, talking in low voices or not at all. We got a few curious looks, mostly at me. Omegas didn't usually walk in here unattached. I headed straight for the beverage station. Vince followed like he always did, close enough that I could feel the halo of his presence, far enough that he technically wasn't touching me. I picked up 2 cups, pushed one into his hand before he could protest, and started working the machine. What are you doing? He asked. Saving your taste buds, I said. I've seen what you call coffee. It's a war crime. I drink it black, he said. It's efficient. Efficient is not a flavor, I said. Stand there and learn. I poured espresso into both cups, then added hot water to his, and a shameful amount of sugar to mine. I hesitated, eyed his cup, then grabbed a tiny packet of sugar and dropped it in too. He frowned. I didn't ask for that. You also didn't ask to not be a machine, I said. But here we are. We carried the cups to a small table near the corner. I plopped down, cradling mine between my hands. He sat opposite me, posture perfectly straight, as if the chair were just an extension of his spine. Try it, I said. He looked at the cup like it was part of a test he hadn't studied for. Vince, I said. It's coffee, not a grenade. He took a slow sip. His face didn't change much, but I saw it. The barest lift of his eyebrows, a flicker of something like surprise loosening his expression. Well? I prompted. There is... He paused, which for him was basically an emotional monologue. More flavor than I expected. I snorted. That's called not drinking burned bean water straight from hell. You should try it again sometime. He took another sip without arguing. Something in my chest did a weird, traitorous thing at the sight. A tiny, unwelcome warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the drink in my hands. This was not part of the plan. I laughed, because the alternative felt too dangerous. Look at you, I said. Living on the edge. Sugar. Next thing you know, you'll start using contractions and saying can't instead of cannot. He studied me over the rim of his cup. You call me a factory defect, he said. What does that make you? A recall notice with good hair, I said promptly. He didn't smile. Not fully, but his eyes softened. Just a fraction. And he didn't look away. Not after 1 second. Not after 2. The world around us faded. Voices, footsteps, the hum of the dispensers. It was just us, locked in this small, impossible moment between an Omega who'd come, here to tear things down, and an Alpha who'd been built not to feel anything at all. My throat went dry. This was wrong. He was supposed to be a target, a symbol, a stepping stone to the truth, not a person sitting across from me, learning that coffee could actually taste like something, looking at me like he was trying to decode a language no one had bothered to teach him. Heat crept up the back of my neck. I dropped my gaze, breaking the connection before it could turn into something I couldn't control. Don't get used to this, I said lightly, taking a gulp of my drink that was way too hot. It burned all the way down, which honestly, I deserved. I still plan on ruining your life. He set his cup down with careful precision. I know, he said softly. When I looked up again, his face was back to neutral. Every line smoothed, every fracture hidden. But I'd seen it now. The first glitch in the system. And the worst part? It wasn't just his. The call came just after midday. Vince had been quietly reviewing a security report, meaning he stared at it like he was trying to intimidate the text into rearranging itself, when his wrist comm chimed with a sharp, urgent tone. Sector 4 disturbance. The voice crackled through. Unregulated crowd movement near the transit market. Possible escalation. Vince didn't pause. Acknowledged. Dispatch unit. He didn't look at me when he added, You're coming? Of course I am, I said, slinging my guitar case over my shoulder. Wouldn't want to miss our afternoon bonding exercise. He ignored me, which was becoming his favorite hobby. The clean zone again. Except this time, it wasn't the warm, chaotic marketplace from the previous day. This time the square was a fractured storm. Crowds spilled out of the transit hub, people shouting, pushing, forming tight clusters that rippled with tension. Vendors slammed shutters. Kids were pulled behind crates. A few brave idiots recorded everything on old phones. Vince drove through the mess like a ghost, silent, focused, untouched by the chaos swirling around us. He parked at the edge of the square, got out, and his presence snapped the air like a reset switch. People stumbled back without being told. Regulation uniforms had that effect. My heart hammered faster than the situation called for. I didn't like crowds. Too many ways to get lost. Too many ways to get caught. You stay behind me, Vince ordered. A phrase that should have annoyed me. Instead, it hit somewhere low in my chest in a way I refused to examine. Yeah, I muttered. Human shield. Got it. We moved into the square. The noise was a physical thing. Shouts, curses, metal clanging, bottles breaking. The smell of fried oil mixed with smoke and sweat and ozone. A group of men clustered near a stall that had tipped over, blocking part of the street. One of them spotted Vince, swore and bolted. Stay close, Vince said. Then he moved. And for the first time, I saw what he actually was when regulations stripped the leash. He didn't run. He cut through space. Every step precise. Every pivot calculated. He kept his center low. Muscles coiled. Movements sharp enough to slice the air. One of the men swung a pipe. Vince caught it mid-arc. Just caught it. His hand didn't even shake. The man staggered back, eyes wide, as Vince twisted the pipe clean from his grip and tossed it aside like trash. A second tried to flank him. Vince swept his leg out, hooked the guy's ankle, flipped him neatly onto the ground. I'd seen him move fast before, but this was different. This was violence engineered with the efficiency of a machine and the instinct of a predator. And then they saw me. 3 men peeled off from the cluster. 2 big, 1 wiry, all desperate. Maybe they noticed my missing bracelet. Maybe they saw an omega without regulation markings. Maybe they just liked easy prey. Whatever the reason, they started toward me, eyes lighting up with the kind of hunger that made my stomach drop. I took a step back. This part I hated. Vince, I began. Too late. One of them lunged, grabbing for my arm. I jerked away, but the second one boxed me in. Fingers grazed the strap of my case. My breath hitched. And then Vince was there, not walking, not running, just there. His hand closed around the first man's wrist with a force that made bone pop. The guy screamed. Vince yanked him back and threw him across the pavement like a rag doll. The second reached for me. Vince's arm shot out, slamming him into the wall so hard dust rained down from the bricks. The third didn't even get close. Vince pivoted, elbow driving into his ribs with surgical precision. In 5 seconds, all 3 were on the ground. And Vince was breathing hard, not from exertion. He hadn't even broken a sweat. From something else. His pupils were blown wide, his shoulders tense, chest rising and falling like he was fighting an internal command, like that attack on me had triggered something primal, something he didn't usually let out to play. My throat went dry. That, I said, voice uneven, was unnecessary. His head snapped toward me. Unnecessary? His tone was low, tight, too tight. They laid hands on you. Yeah. And you turned them into floor decorations. I was fine. You were not. The words vibrated with something I didn't recognize. Anger? Fear? Claiming? No. No. Not going there. You're my responsibility, he said. There it was again, that word. Heavy, weighted, dangerous. I crossed my arms, partly to look defiant, mostly to hide the shake in my hands. And if I don't want to be? I asked. His eyes locked onto mine with unsettling intensity. This, he said quietly, is not the kind of assignment you choose. The meaning under the words landed hot and solid in my chest. A tremor ran through me, from adrenaline, from fear, from everything I refused to name. I tore my gaze away, trying to steady my breath. This wasn't good. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be this person who moved like a storm but looked at me like I was the center of it. I should have hated him, but my body had other ideas. The ride back. The car was silent, except for the low hum of the engine. My pulse was still too fast, refusing to settle. Every time I replayed the scene, his hand closing around that guy's wrist, the violence. In his voice when he said you were not fine, something twisted inside me. Not fear. Not exactly. Something sharper, warmer, infinitely worse. Vince kept his eyes on the road, one hand gripping the wheel harder than usual. His knuckles were pale. You're hurt, he said suddenly. I'm not. He didn't argue. He didn't believe me either. We drove in silence until the scenery shifted from chaotic color back to sanitized white. Room 7F felt smaller than usual when he closed the door behind us. The air thicker. He stood there, still too close, still too still. You should rest, he said. Right, I muttered. Because nothing says restful, like almost being kidnapped. He didn't react, but his jaw tightened. His shoulders dropped 1/2 inch. His voice, when it came again, was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I won't let it happen again. Something inside me lurched hard enough that I had to sit down. Great. Perfect. Just what I needed. A glitching alpha with a hero complex. And a heart that didn't understand the meaning of the word enemy anymore. By the time I decided to break into the archives, I'd spent enough days in Vince's orbit that my plan for revenge had started to feel hazy around the edges, which made that exactly the right time to remind myself why I was here. It started with a badge. Not mine. I didn't have one anymore. But there are so many moving parts in a system this big that, if you squint, some of them look like doors. Engineering audit, I said, holding up the forged digital ID to the board beta at the sub-level access checkpoint. Central sent the request this morning. Archive subnets throwing latency spikes. He barely glanced at the tablet before waving me through. Nobody questions the people who fix things until everything breaks. The cold hit first. Archive levels were kept a few degrees below comfortable, allegedly for optimal hardware performance. In practice, it meant the corridors felt like walking through a refrigerated throat. The light was dimmer here, a colder white that flattened everything, turned walls into abstract planes and people into moving shadows. Cameras watched from the corners, tiny black eyes behind reinforced glass. I cataloged their positions without thinking. At this point, I could spot a lens faster than I could find a restroom. My coveralls, standard regulation gray, itched along the collar. My fake badge blinked its borrowed authentication token at every scanner. Each time the panel flickered green, my heart gave a little lurch, like it hadn't quite believed we'd get away with it. One more corridor, one more door. The archive core sat at the end, behind a reinforced panel that hummed with power. On the wall beside it, a recessed access pad for maintenance overrides. I pulled a tool from my pocket, one of my own design this time, a little credit. Card-sized parasite that slid neatly into the slot like it belonged there. "Come on, sweetheart," I murmured. "Just a small identity crisis. You'll feel better after—" The pad's light flickered, protested, then blinked steady green. The door unlocked. Cold air rolled over me, sharper, carrying the faint scent of ozone and metal. Rows of server towers stretched into the dim, each stack lit by tiny pulsing LEDs. Cable bundles ran like veins along the floor and ceiling. The only sound was the low, constant hum of data being chewed, digested, repackaged. I exhaled slowly and stepped inside. This part felt almost like home. I grabbed an empty terminal at the side wall and slid into the seat. My fingers hovered over the keys for a second, shaking, not from the chill, but from everything this room represented. Answers, or lies pretending to be answers. I jacked my own device into the underside of the terminal, masking the connection under a standard diagnostic protocol. To any log file, I'd look like just another engineer poking at latency stats. To me, the system opened up like a throat. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's see if you still speak my language." I navigated through menus that were supposed to be off-limits to anyone without top-tier clearance. Security tiers, incident reports, mission logs. Every directory was a familiar kind of hostile, barbed with encryption, riddled with little traps. I stepped around them carefully. I'd helped design some of those snares, once upon a different version of me. That person would have been proud of the work. I hated him a little for that. Search, incident files, past operations, irregular threats. A list appeared. Dates, reference numbers, acronyms only insiders bothered decoding. My stomach twisted as I scrolled. There. File 34. Oh. I clicked. The screen filled with text blocks, headers, scanned images. Subject, elimination of unregistered threat. Status, terminated. Supervising officer, Karen, Vince. My breath stuttered. I scrolled down. The first image was a surveillance capture. Grainy, but clear enough. A man in his 40s, dark hair starting to gray at the temples, tired eyes that still held a trace of mischief even in low res. He stood outside an unregistered terminal station, one hand shoved in his coat pocket like he'd been about to say something clever. "My father, you weren't supposed to be here," I whispered. The next image was worse. Same alley, same man. Only now he was on the ground, body at an angle bodies weren't meant to make. A dark stain spread under him like the city was trying to swallow the evidence. The caption below it read, "Neat and precise. Threat neutralized. Confirmed." I swallowed hard. Bile burned the back of my throat. For a second, the cold room spun around me. Guilt hit first, sharp and stupid. I hadn't been there. I couldn't have stopped it. But part of me still felt like I'd failed some test I hadn't known about. Then the guilt burned away, leaving room for something hotter. Rage. It surged up so fast my fingers tightened on the edge of the terminal until my knuckles went white. I scrolled further. Justification. Subject involved in unauthorized access to regulation systems. Potential risk level. Critical. Recommendation. Elimination to prevent systemic compromise. Down the page, at the bottom, sat the line I already knew was there and still wasn't ready to see. Executing Officer, Karen. Vince. Signature. Attached. His name in all caps, rendered in a crisp, digital font. Like the universe wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. Heat flooded my face. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I blinked furiously as my vision blurred. I had imagined this moment 1,000 ways. Finding proof. Seeing his name linked to my father's last day. I'd thought it would feel clean. Like snapping a puzzle piece into place. Finally confirming what I'd always suspected. It didn't. It felt like standing in the middle of a road while 2 trucks sped toward me from opposite directions. I forced my eyes to keep moving. There were timestamp logs, location coordinates, a brief sterile description of how the operation went down. Minimal resistance, rapid resolution, no collateral damage. I read the line 3 times before I realized what was wrong with it. The date. I pulled up an internal calendar. Fingers moving faster now. I cross-referenced known events, my own memories, old fragments of news I'd hoarded on offline drives. The operation date listed in the report didn't match, not by hours, by days. My father died on a Tuesday. I remembered the way the light had looked through our kitchen window. Remembered the call not coming, the messages going unanswered. File 340 had the operation tagged as Friday. I scrolled back up, checked the header, the metadata. Everything looked official, too official. Clean edges, crisp formatting, no corruption, no overwrites, no anomalies. On the surface, I'd made forgery tools look like that. A slow chill crept up my spine. I zoomed in on the signature, attached to Vince's name. It wasn't a physical scribble, of course. Regulation had switched to digital key signs years ago, but even those had fingerprints. Tiny deviations, lag spikes, unique patterns. This one was perfect. Too perfect. A trace overlay showed no micro delays, no rhythm, just a smooth, mathematically flawless insertion. Like someone had copied a template and pasted it onto the form. My heartbeat shifted from ragged rage to a different kind of pounding. Sharper, more focused. Somebody had cleaned this file. Hard. Why? To protect Vince? To frame him? Or because he was the easiest name to attach to a mess no one wanted to investigate? You wanted a monster. A bitter voice in my head whispered. You built your whole plan around one. What if he's not the kind of monster you thought? The anger didn't vanish. My chest still ached. My throat still felt raw. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and humiliating. I blinked them back. Answers lived here. But so did lies. The system I'd helped create was very good at burying truth under pretty, plausible data. I stared at the screen, at my father on the ground, at Vince's too-perfect signature, at the mismatched dates. Nothing about this was simple anymore. I wasn't sure it ever had been. I didn't go back to room 7F right away. I paced the sub-level corridor until my pulse leveled from impending cardiac arrest to merely catastrophic meltdown. Cold air clung to my skin. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I blinked, I saw the image of my father's body on the ground. Every time I breathed, I saw Vince Karen under executing officer. I kept hearing the question echo through my skull like a cracked bell. Why would they clean the file? Why would they fake the signature? Why him? But questions didn't matter. What mattered was that he was the name on the report. And I deserved, to hear him say it. When I finally reached 7F, the lights inside were dimmed to evening mode. Vince stood across the room, halfway through unbuckling his uniform jacket. He turned as the door slid shut behind me. "You're late," he said, in that calm, clipped tone of his. "Where were... You killed my father." It came out raw. No build-up, no preparation, just violence in the shape of words. Vince froze, not the tiny stutters I'd seen before. This was... total. Like someone had unplugged him from the world. For a full 2 seconds, he didn't breathe. Then, what? His voice wasn't flat. It wasn't cold. It was small, unsteady. Good. Let him feel it. You heard me. I stepped closer, chest tight, anger burning hot under my skin. You killed him. File 34 Omega. Threat neutralized. That was my father. His eyes widened, shock, real shock breaking over his face in a fracture so sharp it made something in me twist. Max, no. He took a step toward me, stopped when I flinched. I don't remember that. You don't remember murdering someone? My voice cracked. Convenient. His hand lifted, then pressed to his temple like he was holding his skull together. I don't, he said, and the words scraped out of him like it hurt. I don't remember that operation. I don't remember him. Oh, that's perfect. The one time you decide to be forgetful. It's not forgetting. His voice sharpened. Fear, not anger. It's missing. Like... He pressed harder at his temple. Like something was removed. Removed? I laughed, broken and bitter. From your memory? Who does that? Unless you're covering your own damn tracks. He shook his head slowly, as if fighting through fog. My records... They've been altered before. His breathing hitched. Certain missions. Certain orders. Classified revisions. I thought... He swallowed hard. I thought it was protocol. I didn't question. You didn't question. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't wipe them. Didn't hide them. You kill a man and don't even question why the memory's missing. His expression twisted. Pain, confusion, the beginning of something like panic. I'd never seen panic on his face. Never even imagined it was possible. I didn't know. Vince tried to step closer again. Max, listen. Don't, I snapped. My whole body shook. Rage, grief, exhaustion. Everything blending until it was hard to see straight. You took everything from me. Everything. And I came here to destroy you for it. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Vince stared at me like I'd hit him in the chest with a blunt object. You came here to destroy me? Yes. My voice trembled. That was the plan. He flinched. Vince Karen flinched. Something behind his eyes flickered. Some sharp, splitting realization he wasn't built to handle. He looked devastated. Good, I told myself. He should hurt. He deserves it. But the thought didn't land clean. It shook in my chest, wobbling between righteousness and something much darker, much softer. I dragged in a breath. You signed the report, I said. Your name was on it. Your code. Your authorization. That signature. His breathing shortened. It wasn't me. You expect me to believe that? His voice cracked. Yes. The sound hit me like a blow. Not because it was loud, but because it wasn't. I'd never heard Vince sound like that. Uncertain. Fractured. He took another step forward, slower this time, as if approaching a wild animal. I don't lie, he said. I don't need to. If I remembered that operation, if I had done it, I would tell you. His hands were shaking. Vince's hands, shaking. I don't remember it, he whispered. Max, I don't remember him. But something in me. He pressed a hand to his sternum like something physically hurt there. Something is wrong. I can feel the gap. The raw confusion in his voice lodged itself under my ribs like a shard of glass. Don't, I said, voice thin. Don't act like the victim here. I'm not, he said. You are. That broke something. I lunged toward him, anger, grief, everything boiling over. You're the monster, I said. You always have been. His face twisted. Not with defensiveness. Not with anger. With something like heartbreak. Do you want me to be? He asked quietly. Will that give you closure? The question punched the air from my lungs. We stood inches apart. Chest to chest. My fists trembling at my sides. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to scream and claw and run. Instead, my voice came out hoarse, cracked, ruined. I want the truth. Vince didn't move away. And in the dim, cold light of room 7F, with his breathing uneven and mine shaking apart, He gave the only answer he had. I don't know it, he said. But I'll find it. With you or without you. Whatever it costs. His eyes, usually cool, flat, unreadable, were bare. Open. Terrifying. Not a machine. Not a weapon. Just a man who didn't know what he'd done. Or what had been done to him. I swallowed hard. The room spun. I hated him. God, I hated him. And yet, I couldn't look away. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't. Because the room felt wrong. Too quiet. Too cold. Too full of the aftershocks of what Vince had said, and what I'd said back. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face when I accused him. The shock. The fracture. The way his voice had broken when he said he didn't remember. It didn't make any of it better. It just made everything messier. At some point, I sat on the floor beside the bed, arms around my knees, staring at the dark line where the wall met the floor. The silence pressed against my ears until it hummed. A chime shattered it. Not the soft internal notifications I'd learned to recognize around him. A different one. Sharper. Urgent. Vince was already on his feet by the time the door slid open and he stepped back. Inside, hair mussed from running, chest rising fast, eyes darker than usual. What? I started. Pack what you need, he said. The tone was all wrong. Tight. Clipped. Wired with danger. My pulse jumped. Why? What happened? He didn't answer immediately. He scanned the room, shoulders rigid, jaw set, every sense tuned outward like he expected someone to burst in any second. Then, with a voice so controlled it sounded like a held breath, "They know," the words hit like ice water down my spine. "Know what?" I asked, even though I already felt the answer forming like a bruise. About the bracelet. He didn't blink. About you. About my override. My stomach plummeted. He kept going, faster now, the cracks in his composure widening. They intercepted the anomaly report from the rooftop. Regulation didn't flag it immediately, but a secondary audit caught the missing transmission. They traced the override to my unit. My chest tightened. So, they're coming? For me? For both of us. A beat. Because of course they were. A unit leader who breaks protocol to protect an Omega? That wasn't an infraction. It was treason. What are you supposed to do? I whispered. His throat bobbed once as he swallowed. Turn you in. The words stabbed. Too sharp. Too real. And you're going to? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Vince looked at me then. Really looked. No armor. No mask. Just a man standing on the edge of a decision he wasn't built to make. I have two official options, he said quietly. Comply, a breath, or resist. My voice came out small. So which is it? His gaze locked onto mine. Something fierce and electric flickered behind his eyes. Something I hadn't seen before. Not violence, not programming. Choice, a real one. Then he stepped toward me. One step. Then another. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Close enough that I could feel my heartbeat trying to sync with his. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, and nothing like protocol. Neither. I blinked. What? He reached out. For the first time, he was the one who initiated contact. His hand closed around mine, firm, warm, a shock straight down my spine. No command, no restraint. No regulation, just choosing. His fingers tightened. We're leaving. My breath caught. What? We're leaving, he repeated. Now. But you said your orders. I don't care. His jaw clenched, a tremor running through it. I won't give you to them. My heart stuttered. Vince Karen, Regulation's perfect soldier, the man who lived and breathed protocol, was choosing to break everything he was built on. For me. But why? I whispered. He didn't look away. Because losing you is not an outcome I accept. My knees nearly gave. Sirens wailed somewhere deep in the building, faint but growing louder. Heavy footsteps reverberated from the corridor. Vince pulled me closer, gripping my hand like his life depended on it. Stay behind me, he said. The irony would have been funny if I weren't dizzy with adrenaline. I swallowed hard. Where are we going? He squeezed my hand once. Out, he said. Before they take the choice from us. The lights flickered red. A warning blared through the halls, but all I could feel was his hand in mine. Warm, solid, terrifying. We ran, and for the first time since this began, I wasn't sure who was leading whom. We hit the streets running. Literally. Vince didn't slow, didn't look back, just cut a path through the narrow back alleys with the certainty of someone who'd memorized the entire district. The moment we crossed into the clean zone, the city swallowed us whole. Neon dripping down walls, steam hissing from cracked vents, vendors shouting over each other, crowds shifting like an unpredictable tide. Behind us, the sirens grew fainter. Regulation vehicles hesitated at the border, unwilling to enter without full tactical support. But drones? Drones had no such hesitation. The first one swooped low over the rooftops, spotlights slicing a harsh white beam across the ground. I ducked instinctively. Vince's hand tightened around mine. Keep moving, he said. We darted between market stalls, knocking into metal crates and hanging fabrics. A cloud of spice smoke hit my face, burning my eyes. Someone yelled. Someone laughed. Typical clean zone chaos, now with added fear. Another drone buzzed overhead, scanning. Vince yanked me under a rusted fire escape, pressing me against the wall as the beam passed inches from my shoes. His breath hitched. Short, controlled, strained. This isn't sustainable, I whispered when the drone turned the corner. I know. He scanned the alley, evaluating exit points, threats, probabilities. We reached the lower tunnels. They won't follow without clearance. Great, I panted. And how do we get there without getting fried on the way? His eyes flicked down to me, dark, focused, intense. Together, my heart skipped for reasons I refused to examine. The chase tightens. We sprinted again. The alley narrowed, funneling us into a street teeming with late-night vendors. A cart toppled beside us as we shoved past. People shouted after us, but no one intervened. Clean zone residents knew better than to get involved in regulation business. Left, Vince ordered. Your left or my left? Max. I swerved right, barely missing the next drone's scan beam. Vince caught up, grabbed my shoulder, and pushed me flat against a graffiti-covered wall. Distant shouting, metal boots pounding pavement. They're on foot now, I said. Then we moved faster. He wasn't aggressive, not the way he'd been during the attack. His movements were sharp, protective, intentional. He never shoved or dragged. He guided, stayed between me and every danger, calculated each route with mechanical precision but acted with something far more human. Emotion, fear, determination. We cut through a maze of alleys until we reached a quieter stretch, old buildings with sagging balconies and flickering lights. Vince slowed, his grip loosened. Max, he said, voice low. There's something you need to hear before we reach the tunnels. I froze. His tone wasn't urgent. It was heavy. Now? I asked. Mid-chase? Yes. Because after this, you'll need to choose. Choose what? Choose who? Before I could ask, Vince took a breath that shook slightly at the exhale. Your father, he said quietly. He wasn't a threat. My stomach clenched painfully. Don't. Not now. No. His gaze locked on to mine. You deserve the truth. He was a witness. He uncovered tampered evidence in a trafficking case tied to regulation. He tried to report it. I blinked. Hard. What? He wasn't accessing restricted systems. He was trying to blow the whistle. The world tilted. My father wasn't breaking anything, I said numbly. He was trying to fix it. Vince nodded once. Blood roared in my ears. I braced a hand against the wall. Then why? Why the report? Why your name? His jaw tightened. Because that day, I wasn't there. I stared. What? I had been reassigned, quietly. My supervisor, Chief Harrow, used my credentials. He forged my authorization. Afterward, he ordered my memory scrubbed for operational clarity. The name hit me like a blow. Chief Harrow, The man who'd signed my intake review. The one who'd questioned me on day one. The one who smiled too easily. He killed my father, I whispered. Yes, Vince said, to silence him. And he used me as the perfect scapegoat. Rage flared so violently I nearly staggered. And you didn't know? His voice broke. Max, I swear to you, I never remembered that mission until tonight. I never saw your father. I never touched him. I didn't do it. I searched his face for any trace of deception. There wasn't any. Before I could speak, footsteps thundered at the mouth of the alley. A squad of masked operatives, weapons raised. Target acquired. One shouted, Karen, stand down and surrender the Omega. Vince stepped in front of me immediately. No, he said. The squad spread out. One lunged. Vince moved. But so did I. We weren't coordinated, not at first. His punch met my shove. My trip maneuver opened a gap he used. His block gave me space to disable one of their drones with a smashed bottle. We weren't graceful. We were effective. Like two jagged pieces that accidentally fit. A blast of stun energy hit the wall above my head. I flinched, stumbled, and Vince caught my arm, pulling me back against him. We need to go, he said, voice low and fierce. Now, I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who stepped between me and danger. At the man who chose me over orders. At the man who wasn't a murderer. Just another victim of a machine that ate people whole. I swallowed. Okay, I whispered. Lead the way. His fingers slid down my arm, found my hand. And in the middle of a firefight, with smoke curling around us and danger closing in from all sides, he squeezed. Not hard, not commanding. Just there. Our first step forward was almost simultaneous. We ran as one. We climbed until my legs trembled. Rusted ladders, abandoned fire escapes, moss-slick metal. The clean zone spread below us like a living organism, lights flickering, voices rising and falling, engines rumbling far below like a restless sea. The same rooftop where it all began, where he caught me, where I thought dying would be better than being found. Now we stood in the wind, breathing hard, hearts still racing from the chase, clothes streaked with dust and smoke. The city glowed beneath us. Alive. Imperfect. Chaotic. Beautiful. Vince stood a few feet away, hands braced on the railing as he scanned every shadow, every flicker of movement, making sure we weren't followed. The tension in his shoulders softened only when he finally accepted we were alone. I wrapped my arms around myself, staring at the same ledge I'd nearly thrown myself over days ago. Funny how a place can look the same and mean something completely different. My throat tightened. Well, I said, voice too light for the weight inside me, that's it, I guess. My grand plan, my noble crusade, my life's mission. I laughed, harsh, cracked, failed. Spectacularly. Vince turned. The wind caught his hair, messy for once, softening the sharpness of his face. There were bruise-like shadows under his eyes. He looked tired, human, breakable. I hated how much that mattered to me. I came here to destroy you, I said. Every step I took was supposed to lead to that. To justice. To revenge. My voice wavered. And now I don't even know what justice means. I don't know anything anymore. He took one step toward me. Not forceful, not looming. Just there. You can go, he said quietly. The words punched something out of me. You can walk away, he continued, eyes steady on mine. No more orders. No more pursuit. I'll draw them off. Buy you time to disappear. You'll be safe, without him. A strange ache spread in my chest. Sharp, paralyzing. That's what you want, isn't it? He asked. Softer now. To leave all of this behind? I swallowed hard. I don't know what I want. He took another slow step until he stood right in front of me. Close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, grounding me, anchoring me. Then, with a gentleness that made my breath catch, Vince reached out and wrapped, his fingers around my wrist, his touch careful, like he feared I might break. Max, he said, you can leave. A pause. But you'll stay. If you want to. Something broke inside me. Not violently. Quietly. Like thaw. Why? I whispered. Why ask me to stay after everything? After what I believed? What I did? His thumb brushed my pulse point. Barely there, almost accidental. His eyes didn't waver. Because, he said, voice low and certain, you are my last season. The words hit me like heat after a lifetime of winter. Last. What? The last season of my life the way it used to be, he said. The end of who I was. The beginning of what comes next. After you, the world won't be the same. I won't be the same. My breath shuddered out of me. He wasn't holding me tight. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't claiming. Just offering. A choice. Slowly, almost without thinking. I stepped closer, until my forehead rested against his chest. His breath caught, just a fraction, before his other hand lifted to my back, hesitant but sure. The city roared below us. The wind carried our uneven breaths into the night. I should go, I whispered. I know, he murmured. I can't. His arms tightened. I know. I exhaled, long and trembling, letting the last of my plan, my rage, my certainty fall away like dust. I'm staying, I said. The way Vince's breath hitched against my ear was almost a confession. And for the first time since this all began, the rooftop didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of the last season,